Around 1200 BCE, the ancient world entered a crisis so vast and so sudden that multiple advanced civilizations collapsed almost simultaneously, not through one great war or a single enemy, but through a cascading failure of systems that had sustained human society for centuries, as cities that once thrived on trade, agriculture, and centralized authority fell into silence, leaving behind ruins, broken tablets, and unanswered questions, because the Bronze Age collapse was not a conquest, it was a disappearance, a moment when civilization itself seemed to forget how to function, as kingdoms that had dominated entire regions vanished within a few generations, and no single explanation fully accounts for the scale of destruction, making this one of the most mysterious turning points in human history, as interconnected societies that relied on long-distance trade for metal, food, and resources suddenly found those networks breaking down, cutting lifelines that could not easily be replaced, because bronze itself required complex supply chains, combining copper and tin sourced from distant lands, and when those routes failed, weapons weakened, tools disappeared, and economic stability unraveled, creating vulnerability not just militarily, but socially, as administrative systems dependent on written records, taxation, and redistribution collapsed when scribes vanished and institutions failed, causing knowledge itself to become fragmented as literacy declined sharply, and with it the ability to coordinate large-scale society, turning once organized states into scattered settlements struggling for survival, while environmental pressures intensified the crisis, as evidence suggests prolonged droughts and climate instability reduced agricultural yields, triggering food shortages that weakened populations already under stress, forcing migration, internal unrest, and competition over shrinking resources, as people abandoned cities no longer able to support them, leaving behind monumental architecture that stood empty, silent witnesses to a world that had moved on. While political authority fractured as centralized power lost legitimacy because rulers could no longer guarantee protection, food, or stability, leading to rebellions, internal conflict, and the breakdown of loyalty that had once held these societies together, as smaller groups replaced large bureaucratic states, prioritizing survival over administration. And in this vacuum, violence increased, not necessarily through organized warfare, but through constant instability, raiding, and insecurity that made rebuilding nearly impossible, as trust between regions collapsed, trade ceased, and isolation replaced cooperation, creating a feedback loop where decline accelerated decline as each failed system weakened the next, while archaeological layers show widespread destruction, abandoned cities, and population decline across regions once considered the heart of civilization, from palace complexes reduced to rubble to rural settlements disappearing entirely. As craftsmanship quality declined, monumental construction stopped, and artistic traditions were lost or simplified, indicating not just temporary hardship, but a long-term regression in complexity, as generations grew up without access to the knowledge, infrastructure, or security their ancestors had taken for granted, creating what historians later called a dark age, not because nothing happened, but because so much was lost that recovery took centuries, as oral tradition replaced written records and memory became fragile, while myths later attempted to explain what history no longer could, transforming collapse into legend, as surviving communities redefined identity, adapting to a harsher, more localized world where survival depended on resilience rather than empire. And yet, the collapse was uneven, with some regions adapting faster than others, suggesting that flexibility, decentralization, and local resource control offered better chances of survival than rigid, centralized systems, highlighting a lesson that echoes through history, that complexity brings power, but also vulnerability, as systems optimized for efficiency can fail catastrophically when stressed beyond their limits, because the Bronze Age world was interconnected in ways that magnified collapse, not unlike modern globalization, where disruption in one area can cascade across continents, making this ancient event feel unsettlingly familiar as later civilizations would rebuild on the ruins of the old, learning some lessons while repeating others, as new technologies like iron slowly replaced bronze, allowing different social structures to emerge. But the memory of collapse lingered in the archaeological record as a warning etched into stone foundations and broken fortifications, showing that progress is not linear and that human advancement can reverse suddenly when systems fail. As historians continue to debate causes, proposing invasions, migrations, climate change, internal revolts, and technological shifts, yet increasingly recognizing that no single factor was responsible, because collapse occurred when multiple stresses aligned at once, overwhelming societies that had grown too complex to adapt quickly, making the Bronze Age collapse not a story of defeat, but of fragility, revealing that civilization itself is a balancing act between stability and adaptability, and when that balance breaks, recovery is slow, painful, and uncertain, as centuries passed before large-scale urban life returned, before writing systems stabilized, and before long-distance trade networks re-emerged, proving that collapse was not temporary chaos, but a structural reset of the human world, reshaping cultural trajectories for millennia to come, as new identities formed from the remnants of the old, carrying fragments of lost knowledge forward, while forgetting much more. And this forgetting may be the most haunting legacy of all, because it reminds us that history is not guaranteed to remember everything, that entire worlds can disappear, leaving only clues, and that humanity's greatest threat is not always invasion or catastrophe, but the slow unraveling of the systems it depends upon, as the Bronze Age collapse stands as a silent warning from the deep past, showing that even the most advanced civilizations can fall, not with a final battle, but with a gradual failure to adapt, communicate, and sustain themselves under pressure, making it one of the most profound and unsettling chapters in human history, not because of what was destroyed, but because of how completely it was forgotten.